Got a rough one for you today. So we're talking about a movie called Caligula. Wait, don't leave. I had to watch this so many times to make this. Please don't let that be in vain. I'm begging you. This is going to be an odd one because what I'm discussing is essentially just a word I can't even say on the platform, let alone this early on in the video. Actually, I'll give myself one use of the real word later on, but for now I'm just gonna call it a train spotting 2. I mean no disrespect, I'm not trying to draw some sort of comparison between this and train spotting 2, but it makes sense in reference to the book's title. Now I know this is technically based on a true story, but I'm not even gonna try to point out all the historical inaccuracies in this. If I did, we'd be here for 8 hours, and that's clearly not what the movie's even going for, so there's really no point. Please don't expect me to be all,
Actually, the giant moving wall of torture wasn't invented until Emperor Nero's reign, and it was only used on people who said his name sounded like a plane was flying by.
You may be wondering why I chose to talk about this cinematic experience, and I will tell you that when I figure it out for myself. Let's get into it. Okay, I'm glad we're starting off with a Bible quote because even as a non-believer myself, I can tell you that this movie really needs Jesus. Ah, and some sheep. As a great scholar once said, all good sheep lead to ass. And whose quote is that, you may ask? Well, it was me. Yeah, that's my my new catchphrase. Let's go with that. This particular posterior happens to belong to a Roman noblewoman named Julia Drusilla, currently embroiled in a loving embrace with our title character. Wearing togas, the costume department assumedly got a pretty good deal on when they were digging around in the trash bin behind the Animal House set. After a bit of naked frolicking and him doing whatever this is to her hair, we're shown an artist rendition of what I looked like after sitting through this movie 5 times while working on this script. Caligula is Emperor Tiberius's nephew and heir, and his bang sesh is, very rudely I may add, interrupted by the head of the Praetorian Guard, Macro, summoning Caligula to his uncle's Orgy Palace on the island of Capri, which we'll get to in a second. But first, I think it does bear mentioning that he and Drusilla are actually siblings, so that's good for them, I guess? Just a very close family. But I should also point out that this film is mostly based on accounts written long after Caligula's death by people who did not like him very much, so keep that one in mind for later. So yeah, Orgy Palace. Caligula is suspicious of both his imperial uncle and his advisor Nerva's intentions, and Tiberius apparently furnished his palace with a bunch of naked people and babies. Oh god, no, I've seen a Serbian film already. We're not going there again, no. Don't worry, the babies aren't harmed, at least not that we see. But they did drag Lawrence of Arabia into this mess, though ironically both Larry and Tiberius were probably equally amounts of kinky. Caligula is a cute little dance at his emperor's command, then is given a tour of the palace. His uncle and sister repeatedly refer to him as Little Boots, a nickname given to him in childhood. But this is very confusing when you consider that Caligula was already the nickname Little Boots in Latin. His real name was Gaius. Like I said, we're not getting too much into the history, but it's really weird that they include the nickname but then also refer to him by the Latin version as if it's his actual name. Not important. What is important are the YouTube community guidelines. With that in mind, I won't show you what happens in this next scene, but just imagine something out of a Marquis de Sade novel being acted out by a bunch of people dressed for community theater productions of Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, a woman is doing something with an animal, and I don't know if it's a fish or a snake, but either way, I am terrified. Which is just one of many things going on in this scene that I shudder to even think about. Also, that room must stink. Tiberius tries to poison him, but Caligula offers his drink to Tiberius's grandson, Gemellus, as a test, and gets his uncle to show his hand in order to save the boy. And now, justifiably paranoid Caligula freaks the fuck out when he sees this bird. But is ironically much more cavalier when Nerva is caught attempting to end his own life. Just after that, Caligula makes out with Macro for wanting him to be emperor or something. I don't actually really know what happened. I was too distracted by the fact that he's wearing a thong. I like to think that there's some sort of alternate reality timeline where every single event in this movie is actually true, and some poor archaeologist just had to excavate all of this paraphernalia. Ah, yes. And moving on from the imperial thong, this is the royal Now, it was traditional for emperors to onto the while two younger men would at an while their horses all over the place with their Any questions? No? Great. Now on to the kitchens. Now, obviously, the quote-unquote plot, or as I like to refer to it, the writer's trying to make the Train Spotting 2 seem more than just a, well, Train Spotting 2 needs to get going at some point, so Macro kills Tiberius for Caligula, making the Smolenki Muge the new emperor of Rome. Though Gemellus was a witness to the crime, he smartly sucks up to him in order to avoid sharing his grandfather's fate. Caligula then rewards this by adopting him as heir. He's pretty well received as emperor. Apparently, Tiberius wasn't all that popular. I mean, I guess it makes sense. If nowadays a royal regularly went off to some island sex mansion, they probably wouldn't be much loved either. Oh wait. He makes everyone swear to worship his sister as well as himself, which doesn't go over great, but is still acknowledged. Then casually walks in on someone getting a beej in a secret spy room adjoining his new bedchamber. As you do. And Drusilla convinces him to have Macro executed, which he does by getting Gemellus to testify about what he saw. He then breaks the news to Macro's wife. While she's getting a bath in a substance that is not water, I'll let your imaginations take that one, and banishes her. This movie must have been amazing for Malcolm McDowell to shoot. Not only does he just get to chew the scenery in every scene, but in pretty much every one he's also just grabbing someone's breasts. Normally Drusilla's, but not always. No clue who was in charge of blocking, but they couldn't have added a bit more variety? Couldn't have gone for the ass, or, I don't know, feet? I'm actually surprised. That's the one place the movie doesn't go. Oh wait, yeah, it does! Dear Lord, if worshipping a god was anything like this in reality, I think a lot more of this generation would regularly attend church. Oh my god, why am I doing this? Oh, this is just a friggin' porn. Train Spotting 2, I guess. Whatever, okay, fuck. Helen Mirren is there, yep. That Helen Mirren. Don't ask me why, and he picks her, obviously. Oh, no. Look, I'm doing this to myself. I could stop if I wanted to, and nobody would care. Moving on. Apparently she's a bit of a thought, and his sister isn't happy about it, but I mean, she can't really do anything. Well, yeah, they have sex and the scene ends. Fun fact, that is how a lot of the scenes end. Smash cut to this. You know, the classic execution method, still widely employed today. I hear that's what they used on Dahmer. So now he's keeping Caesonia, Helen Mirren's character, on a leash until she gives birth to a son, which does sound pretty awful, but maybe she's just into that kind of thing. I feel like I do need to acknowledge Proculus's wedding scene. There you go, I acknowledged it. It happened. It's the whole thing and hard to watch. I don't want to talk about it in depth. You don't want to hear about it. Let's move on. I honestly kind of love the setup for this next scene, though. It was obviously supposed to be of some importance, with someone watching in on Caligula having a threesome with Caesonia and his sister. But I guess they thought of having one of his rivals finding out about his incestuous behavior would make too much sense. So then it turns out to just be some women who then have sex, and I don't think we ever see again. Apparently it was originally supposed to be of some note, but then they decided, girl sex hot. And the rest was history. There's like 2 minutes of plot for every 10 minutes of either sex or whatever other fucked up thing they could show. Drusilla's just really fed up with her brother at this point. I mean, yeah, so is everyone.
You amateur.
Amateur?
But damn, can Helen dance. I also never knew I needed to see a horse laying in a bed, but now I have, and I love it. What I do not love is this man's name.
Longinus?
Which is a real Latin name, so I feel sort of bad for finding it so hilarious. I don't care if it's the name of some biblical saint, it sounds like a venereal disease. Like you have to go in every 6 months to get tested for Longinus, and we as a society have to destigmatize it. As well as let people be proud of their ginus, whether it's long or short. Sorry, that was an odd tangent. Thinking he's about to die, he amends his will and names Drusilla his heir. There's a legitimately funny moment, though, where one of the senators, all of whom secretly hate the emperor, by the way, says he wishes it was him dying instead of the Caesar. And Caligula's just like, okay, and then has him executed, and then immediately feels better. Actually, I think for the most part, from here on out, the movie as a whole gets remarkably better. It does shift slightly away from the weird feeling of self-importance, and I'm pretty sure just accepts that no one is taking it that seriously.
The people of Rome. I clearly see come on in the name of Rome. I clearly see come on in the name of the people of Rome. I clearly see come on in the name of Rome. Rome. Caesar, Rome.
Except for when they bring back Proculus. That whole subplot just feels so mean-spirited and unnecessary. Caligula then sees another bird and gets scared by the bad omen. But the next scene is something so weird. Caesonia gives birth to a daughter, named after Drusilla, but the scene filmed is actual birth? No joke, they filmed 3 pregnant women giving birth, cut it together, and put it in the movie. What? Why? Why was that necessary? Imagine being born in this movie. Actually, I think I phrased that wrong. Imagine being born in this movie. All the ones it could have been. Not to mention it must have been uncomfortable as hell for the mothers. They don't even get any interesting shots that would only have been possible while filming it like this. The one, for lack of a better term, action shot, could have easily been faked with special effects if need be, even in 1979. I think they just wanted the bragging rights of doing it like this. He marries Caesonia before realizing it's a girl, and his sister collapses, now stricken with the same illness he'd suffered with. She dies, and Caligula blames the goddess Isis. He then goes all Hulk smash on all of her iconography. Though he shouldn't be upset since she's clearly still breathing. And now he's licking her because at this point, why not? They imply he's gone really crazy now, as if he wasn't before. Caligula wanders the streets lost and confused. Jesus, I'm pretty sure whoever did the set design for this just saw the cat lady's house from A Clockwork Orange and then said, yeah, this is what ancient Rome looked like, and no more questions were asked. And he ends up in the Imperial Drunk Tank. When the hell did he become an expert in close-up magic? Either way, he earns this hairy guy's loyalty and respect with his sleight of hand skills. Then proclaims himself a god and becomes one with the sheep. New head guard Kyria and Ginus Tech Tips seem pretty perturbed by this. But as far as we the audience can tell, this is just a regular Tuesday. What does seem irregular is that the Roman Caesar has, how do I put this? In what is by far the longest and most explicit sequence in the whole movie, Caligula, let's just say, encourages the senators' wives to fundraise via sex work. And hey, I'm all for normalizing it, but this scene is a lot. There is a reason for this. Caligula hates the Senate and gains public popularity by humiliating them. I also do think that, on its own, this part wouldn't be that bad. If this was the only hardcore Trainspotting 2 depiction, it actually could have served as a shocking yet justified climax of the film. No pun intended. However, this is undermined by the obvious reshoots added at the last second that included more explicit content for no creatively driven reason. Admittedly, I do have to mention that there are some fun moments in the scene, but you're not going to get to see any of it. So you can either watch it for yourself or die in ignorance. I really wouldn't blame you for taking the second option.
No Caesar big boys.
The Emperor then decides to go conquer Britain, but he's apparently not played enough Cetera to know where it's located, so he just invades a river instead, and has his naked foot soldiers defeat the papyrus growing nearby. Sans will be devastated. By now he knows everybody wants him dead, and he's just seemingly fine with it. He cares much more about his hairline.
I am going bald.
And this time it's Caesonia scared by the bird. But Caligula has accepted his fate. Then, yeah, they kill him. Although killing his wife and the very obvious doll supposed to be his daughter might have been a bit too far. They then install Claudius on the throne, who has been here the entire time, but I never mentioned him, because all he does is be a little piss boy off to the side. And finally, this confused and very, very unsexy experience comes to an end. But the question remains, why? Not why did it end, thank goodness it did, but why was this big budget erotica made with what is at least supposed to be a somewhat compelling narrative, starring two big-named, well-respected actors. Okay, you could argue Helen Mirren wasn't exactly a household name at that point, but Malcolm McDowell was definitely very, very well known by then. The thing is, it was never supposed to be like this. What I'm pretty sure the creatives behind this were going for was some sort of prestige art film that wasn't afraid to depict certain things more mainstream studios typically shied away from. It almost feels like it was trying to be a Pasolini film, but not really getting nuances. Its message is supposed to be about the dangers of power and influence and how they can corrupt a person, though I'm not sure if that ever really comes across. But I think what really broke this entire movie was a classic case of everybody working with a different goal in mind. I feel a little bad for the director in some respects, because this wasn't meant to be a full-on Trainspotting 2. Most of those scenes were added in post without his knowledge, and as I mentioned about the earlier threesome scene, it was a real detriment to the plot at times. But the plot also inherently didn't make a lot of sense to begin with regards to the aforementioned message. Now, keep in mind, this is just what I interpreted from my research, so I could be a little off base. But from what I understood, in the original screenplay, Caligula would start out a good man, but slowly his morals would deteriorate over time. But then the director, Tinto Brass, did a pretty invasive rewrite and changed it, so he was always a libertine to begin with. It was also apparently his idea to have the theme of absolute power corrupts absolutely to be the through line. But you see how that doesn't make sense, right? If he starts off as already a, as he puts it, born monster, he's just given the freedom to enact his already sadistic desires. Like, you could take his actions at the end of the film and edit them to take place near the beginning and they wouldn't feel out of place at all. Yes, he gets more and more bold about his insults to the Senate, but even then it's not completely a linear progression. I guess I could understand that it was arresting some of the noblemen that was their last straw, but they seemed much more offended by his river war than they do when he literally pimps out their wives. Then, as I said, the editors came in and warped the vision even further because, I don't think I mentioned this, but this movie was produced by Penthouse, and you know, they're known for sex, boobs, and whatever. And then this was the finished product. Until a very recent update to this story. They actually ended up releasing an ultimate cut of the film at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival, which I didn't even know until I started the research for this video. I totally knew that was going to be a thing, and I am very good at making timely YouTube content. Now, this does sound like a good thing for relevancy's sake, but that also means somebody much smarter than me might make a better video on the subject. But if they do, I am way too far into this to quit now, so people are just gonna have to deal with it. However, I cannot speak to the quality of this re-edit because apparently my ticket to the festival and airline tickets must have gotten lost in the mail somewhere. And I certainly didn't have the budget for this video to fly out to France just to watch a movie that's hopefully not a porno. There, I used up my one. Was it worth it? No, it wasn't. Now, the last point I want to make is about the lewd scenes. There are other films I've watched that people could write off as just being an excuse to shove in a bunch of explicit sex scenes, as I might this one in its originally released state. But what I think differentiates this from something along the lines of, say, Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2, is the way those parts are portrayed. I know a lot of people would disagree with me on this. Nymphomaniac itself was not the best received, but I personally thought it was a great movie. But I can acknowledge there are a multitude of valid criticisms against it, especially with the theatrical cut. If you do want to check that one out, go for the director's version right off the bat. It's long but worth it and makes legions more sense. The way the many sexual scenes are filmed in Nymphomaniac are very matter of fact. The camera feels like an objective observer, more watching animals at a zoo than peeping Tom. Maybe with the exception of the polyphony chapter and some moments with Mia Goth's character at the end, none of it feels very intimate, and each one serves to drive the plot in some way or depict a character's mental state. As opposed to the way it's depicted in Caligula, which feels more, oh, what can we throw into this part to make it hotter? Because that's literally how it was done in post. The way those parts were filmed, don't get me started on those. They were filmed like Trainspotting 2s because that's all they were meant to be. No thought for how they'd destroy the pacing and muddy the intentions. Okay, that is all. Like and subscribe, please.